and going live on YouTube. All right, so hi and to Sunday Social. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend and a good week. And I will wait for just about a minute to make sure that everybody who wants to join can come on in to the live. Before we get started, I don't have a whole lot to go over tonight just because last week I didn't have a lot going on. So I'm going to wait for a few seconds and then and again, this won't be very long because I don't have a whole lot going on. Hi, Anita. Okay, so the first thing I am going to talk about though is the meetup. So I did put the poll on the Facebook page, and from the last poll, we all decided that we would have the first meetup in the South, and it would be in June. And it will be in the South, and then we will do another meetup that will be in September, hopefully, where everybody can meet up at one place. So the poll results from last week were that there were 6 people who wanted to meet in Georgia. There were 4 to meet in North Carolina. There were 3 people that wanted to meet in Tennessee, 2 people in South Carolina, and 1 person in Kentucky. Now, I did not vote in this because I didn't want to skew the numbers. So it looks like we will be meeting in Georgia in June. And so I will probably put another post out there on Facebook after this live so that we can decide where at in Georgia we want to meet. I'm thinking Atlanta, but I know there are other places like Augusta, and there are some places that have mountains and that kind of thing. So I will put a poll out there, and you comments under the poll to let me know where you think you would want to meet in Georgia in June. And then we'll also talk about some dates. And then once we have the dates and the place or the city set, then we can look into some activities. So I would like to have this all planned out before the end of April so that it will give people time who want to come in to get things together. It'll be a weekend. It's not going to be anything extravagant. I don't think that we'll be spending lots of money and all the other stuff. It'll be something really, really small where we can probably all go to the same hotel or either a hotel close to each other and just have times to meet up on like that Friday night, Saturday. Well, Friday might not work for some, but definitely for those who can meet on a Friday night, we'll meet up on Friday night, maybe have dinner or something like that. And then Saturday we'll have a day full of, just hanging out, self-care, networking, that kind of thing. And then Sunday, maybe do a brunch for those who are close by and can have, or will be afforded some time to do brunch before going back home. And for those who can't, then, you'll be able to leave on Sunday and that kind of thing. So it'll be very, very, very laid back, nothing formal. It'll be just us meeting up and just having fun with one another, and hopefully doing some major things centered around self-care. So that's that for the meetup. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was counseling. Now, I think I talked about counseling last week, although I don't think that I went to counseling. I didn't go to counseling this past week. So I did want to give an update on counseling. And for me, everything is going well. My therapist has me reading a book. Well, she suggested a book to me called Codependent No More. And I heard that that's a very popular book that a lot of people read who have gone through trauma and that kind of thing. And she also suggested, I don't know if I showed y'all this last week or not, I can't remember, but she suggested Healing the Trauma of Abuse by Mary Ellen Copeland, and then Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. So I have not started either of those books because I like to listen to audiobooks. And so I was not able to find either of those on the app that I use to listen to audiobooks. But I have started reading, listening to Healing from Hidden Abuse, which is written by a social worker named Shannon Thomas. She's an LCSW. So I have started listening to that, and it talks a lot about healing from hidden abuse, which is psychological abuse. So, people gaslighting you and, lying and being deceptive and that kind of thing. And it talks specifically about narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. So if anybody wants to read that, then it's a good read for me. And a lot of people have gone through psychological abuse and don't even know it until they're out of it. And again, I'm on this whole kick about narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder and sociopaths and psychopaths and cluster B personalities and all that kind of thing. So that's what I've been really into lately, especially learning about it after having had a parent that is, I believe, someone who has some traits, as well as a former relationship with someone who had some traits. So that's what I've been reading. I'm also still doing the psychodiagnostics course online through the University of South Carolina. So those are the two things that I'm sticking to right now, is just reading that book and then doing the psychodiagnostics. So other than that, let's see. The main thing I wanted to come on here and talk about tonight, though, is cutting or self-injury, because I work with teenagers mostly who have type 1 diabetes and other chronic conditions. And some of them have a lot of family issues, social issues, depression, anxiety, other mental health issues, and they cut to cope. And so the first time that I came across a patient when I started this job 2.5 years ago, she was cutting and I had no clue what to do. And I was like, well, do I need to report this? Is this something that, is suicidal? Like, how do I deal with this with someone who's a cutter? So I had no clue what to do. I thought that I was mandated to report. And I talked with one of the other social workers who had been on the job a lot longer than me, and someone who was also independently licensed. And she said that I didn't need to report it. And so I'm like, well, what do you do when a child or a patient is a cutter? And so she asked me if the child was in therapy, and I told her yes. And she said, that we might want to let the parent know, to let the therapist know, and that they would handle it from there, because my role in the position that I work in is a case manager and I'm not a therapist. So she just informed me that I needed to let the therapist know. And so I still was kind of like, well, if this child is cutting, like, what if I find out that she cuts again, what am I supposed to do? So I really didn't have a complete answer for that. And so, like I said, that was about 2 years ago. So now that I've been in this job for a while, I've come across quite a few children who are cutters, patients who are cutters. And I think that is good information for me to let you all know about cutting and what to do. And in that kind of situation, because, a lot of us from grad school and from just working in the field, we come across these situations and we're taught that we need to report because we don't want the person to kill themselves and that kind of thing. So let's see here. I take my exam this Saturday. Okay, good luck. We are rooting for you. I hope that you have gotten all of the knowledge you can from the pre-recorded series. And, we're waiting to hear back from you. Going to go ahead and claim it with you that you're going to pass the exam this Saturday. Let's see what else. Hi, Ashley, I sent you a Facebook message. Okay, I haven't checked my messenger in a while. Anita says that she had a teenage cutter before. So what did you do, Anita, before I go into everything about the information that I found? And I actually found, and I still have yet to confirm, I've been trying to confirm since earlier today, that non-suicidal self-injury disorder is actually a disorder in the DSM-5. Now, I don't have a physical copy of the DSM-5, but I was trying to find online whether or not this is actually a disorder, and cutting would be an example of non-suicidal self-injury. I was trying to confirm before getting on here tonight, whether or not that's actually in the DSM-5. So if anybody that's listening right now happens to have a copy of the DSM-5 with them right now, or could look that up, that would be great if you could let us know if that's actually a disorder. But I did happen to find some information. Hi, Adrian. She's on Facebook. I just had to switch over and check that. But a lot of the information, well, no, let me back up because I got distracted. Okay, so I actually found some information online, but it was from 2010. And it said, and I'll read it to you because I made sure to bookmark it, just read some of that information on there. It was in 2010, they were considering adding non-suicidal self-injury disorder to the DSM-5. And we know that they updated the DSM-5 in 2013, and then it became in print in 2015. So I don't know if they have actually added it to the DSM-5. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, okay, let's see. Anita says she uses a red marker and had a boxing bag for coping. Okay, so when you say she uses a red marker, she uses a red marker to cover her cuts, or what does she use the red marker for? And then and she used a boxing bag for coping. So yeah, we'll talk about, some things that you can suggest that the patient does instead of cutting as well, because cutting is supposedly not done to for the person to harm themselves terminally. Okay, so she uses a red marker instead of cutting. Okay. So let's see, Francesca, Ms. Sellers says, I have a question about personal consulting. I'm a great resource connector for the elderly. Can you provide and advise on how I can turn that into a side hustle? Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second, because I don't want to get off track of what I'm doing. I'll go ahead and make a note to talk about that though. Okay, so as far as it being a side hustle though, I don't know that I would call it a side hustle. I would say that you wouldn't have to be knowledgeable in that area if you're going to do anything like that. Also, you need to make sure that you have the correct credentials. A lot of people do life coaching, and so there is a certificate that you can get for life coaching. I would just say do your research, because I don't want to say to just go and make a side hustle out of personal consulting, because I don't want you to look at it as a side hustle. It has to be something that you are invested in and that you are knowledgeable about and that you have experience with. And so I don't want you to see it as a side hustle. I want you to see it as a service that you're providing to people who may need some help. You say I am a great resource connector for the elderly. So I would say be focused on the topics that deal mostly with elderly. And I would think that would be kind of like exploitation of vulnerable adults, whether it's financial or, if it's abuse and that kind of thing. So I would say be knowledgeable about the topics that you want to cover, and definitely don't look at it as a side hustle, but as a service that you can provide because you're knowledgeable and because you're able to help, and you've shown time and time again that you're able to help whatever target population that you're going to be targeting. Yeah. So I would say that, but yeah, we can talk more about that a little later. Send me an email. I'll put the email address here in the comment box. And I'll also put it in the description box at the end of the video too. So now, the first thing though I want to do is to just go ahead and give information about crisis line for people who are engaged or involved in self-injury. And it's 24/7 in the US. And I think they also have a number for Canada. So if you have clients or family or friends who you think could benefit from using a crisis text line, and we all know that, of course, with text, it is kind of iffy. A lot of people, a lot of therapists and social workers don't really like to do a lot of texting with clients, but that's becoming one of the major ways to connect with people now with technology, which is why they updated and amended the Code of Ethics to include electronics, social media, and all that kind of, or technology, social media, and all that kind of stuff, because of the rise in technology and that kind of thing. So 24/7 crisis support in the United States. You can text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. And that's free 24/7 crisis support in the United States. You can text from anywhere in the US to text with a trained crisis counselor. Every texter is connected with the crisis counselor, a real life human being trained to bring texters from a hot moment to a cool, calm, thorough, active listening, and collaborative problem solving. It says that all of the crisis text line crisis counselors are volunteers donating their time to help people in crisis. So, and then it also has a way that you can get involved by being a volunteer to become trained to be a crisis counselor. You can donate, and then you can also share their service with other people. And this is just something that I found earlier today when I was doing this whole cutting thing. So I'm going to put the link in the description box, and I'm also going to put the link in the comment thing here. Let's see if I can get that. So let's see. And then we have Anita saying, yes, I am certified as the professional gerontologist. Okay, good. So I'm going to put that crisis number. Well, I'm going to put the website there that you can go and check that out with the crisis text line. And I know, like I said, a lot of us don't really do the whole texting thing because as therapists and as social workers, we want to be able to at least have face-to-face, whether it's in person or via some kind of video platform where we can see the client and see their reactions and that kind of thing. But again, texting is on the rise, and a lot of teenagers like to text and use their phones. So I'm going to go ahead and put that information here. Again, that's HOME, and you can text it 24/7 to 741-741. And I will go ahead and stick that down here while I have it up so that I can get that information to you. So text HOME to 741-741. This is 24/7. And I think that if any of you have any free time, which I know most of us don't, but some of us do, if you have any free time, I think it would be good to become a volunteer. That's something extra to put on your resume. And even though some of us don't have any crisis counseling experience, being a volunteer for something like this would definitely be a good look on your resume, because it's something that you can do in your spare time while you're working on your license or while you're working on your degree or whatever. And then, that time will add up by the time you get certified until the time that you decide that you want to do a job where that would be a good skill to have. So I would say definitely volunteer if you can. And that's something I'm going to look into, because this whole texting thing is going to be major within the next few years. Text therapy and talking over the phone and all that kind of stuff, even though we hate seeing that kind of stuff because it's not personable. It's good to have that experience with the way that the world is going now. Okay, so I actually was coming from Savannah, Georgia, not yesterday, but the day before. And there was a woman at the stop that we made, and she had a lot of cuts on her arm. And, you kind of just wonder what people are going through when you see stuff like that. She was probably in her 40s, and it was very noticeable, all the cuts on her arms. And just like with my patients that are teenagers, they have the cuts on their arms, and some of them have burn marks on their hands and stuff. And I'll ask them, like, when's the last time you cut? And they'll say, whenever the last time was. And I'll ask them, why do you cut? Like, what does it make you feel? Like, what does it help you with? And a lot of times the teenagers say they don't know why they do it. But I think that maybe they just don't want to get deep into details about why they do it, because I think that they know. But, when you see kids or patients at an office visit that only lasts about, between 10 and 30 minutes, sometimes you don't have enough time to build that kind of rapport with them for them to be able to give you that information. But I work with the same patients for years sometimes. Like, I've had the same patient the whole time I've been at this job. for 2.5 years. And that's because they have a chronic condition that's not going anywhere. So I do have a very strong rapport with some of the teens and their parents as they're becoming young adults, because they start out being, 14. And then by the time before you know it, they're 16, 17 years old. So they build that rapport with you and their family, their parents and stuff. They trust you to talk with the child one-on-one with them outside of the room. And so I have had someone to tell me that they just feel numb sometimes. And so they'll cut so that they can feel normal. And it's very hard for me to connect that because I've never cut before. But I could see that. I've felt numb before. I've only felt numb one time. I literally felt numb and empty one time because of a situation that I had going on. And I remember telling somebody that I just feel empty and numb, but it never came across my mind to cut. But I could see how when you're that emotionally disconnected, that maybe you want to feel something. And, if that feeling is physical, of course, through cutting, I could see. I don't want to encourage this at all, but I'm saying I could see how someone would want to feel, even if it's just a pinch. And that's where the whole cognitive behavioral therapy comes in, where, if you have negative thoughts and that kind of thing, they give you alternative methods to do. So if you have a thought that keeps popping in your mind, sometimes they suggest that you wear like a rubber band around your wrist. And then when you think of that thought, you pull the rubber band and you pop yourself to kind of get you back into that space where you're not thinking about whatever that negative thing was. So there are different coping skills and tools and that kind of thing to help people. But I could see how someone would want to feel something other than emotional pain. And that is really why, according to my research, that they do this kind of thing. And I don't know what this is. Let's see what is going on with this. What is ringing here? Oh, because I'm on Facebook. Let's see. I think somebody's trying to call me. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh, this is one of those things that I can't control. Oh, my family is trying to have a group call. That's what it is. I'll call them back later. So, okay. All right. So let's see. Back to where we were. Okay, so I pulled up a few different things here. Now, I looked at the literature because, that's the kind of thing that they always want us to do, is do a review of the literature and that kind of thing. So I found an article that was written or published online September 2015, and it's called The DSM-5 Diagnosis of Non-Suicidal Self-Injury Disorder, a review of the empirical literature. And if you're anything like me, I don't like research. I don't like looking at statistics and charts and all this stuff and all that macro level kind of stuff. So I'm not going to bore you with that, the abstract background and all that kind of stuff. But if you like that kind of stuff, I'm going to put that in the description box. If you want to look at how they came about, they have results and charts and all this stuff. All that kind of stuff is foreign to me. Like, I don't really look at any of that. So what I think, though, is from what I'm seeing is that from what I read earlier, the non-suicidal self-injury disorder is actually now in the DSM-5, which is something that I didn't know. All I knew, like I said, was that I saw that article from 2010 where they were thinking about adding it to DSM-5. And so it looks like they did. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, but like I said, I'm going to have to keep looking into that and making sure that that's actually something that's in the DSM-5. I tried to do just a generic Google search, and I didn't really find anything that just said for facts that it is in DSM-5. But that's something that we all need to look into, because this is something that, especially if you work with kids, that they do. So going from that article, and again, I'll put all this in the description box, all the links to these sites, if you have free time and you want to look into it. So it says here, of particular interest are two disorders not currently listed in the DSM-4 that are being proposed for inclusion in the DSM-5, non-suicidal self-injury and non-suicidal self-injury not otherwise specified, or NOS as we know it to be. So it says that according to DSM-5.org, these diagnoses are potentially being defined utilizing the following criteria. Again, this is from 2010, and this could actually be different now that the DSM-5 has been published, but this is just going off of this one article, and this is from Psychology Today. So again, if it's not this exact criteria now, that's because this is from 2010. So it says, for non-suicidal self-injury, it says, A, in the last year, the individual has on 5 or more days engaged in intentional self-inflicted damage to the surface of his or her body of a sort likely to induce bleeding or bruising or pain. And this could be done by cutting, burning, stabbing, hitting, or excessive rubbing for purposes not socially sanctioned, like body piercing or tattoos are socially sanctioned, but performed with the expectation that the injury will lead to only minor or moderate physical harm. The absence of suicidal intent is either reported by the patient or can be inferred by frequent use of methods that the patient knows by experience not to have lethal potential. So this is non-suicidal self-injury. So they're engaging in the self-injury not for the purpose of it being lethal, but for the purpose of relief from emotional trauma or turmoil, basically. And it says that the behavior is not of a common and trivial nature, such as picking at a wound or nail biting. So this is cutting, burning, stabbing, that kind of thing. And these are the things that are classified as non-suicidal self-injury. So they're not cutting, and this is not everybody, because some people might be cutting in hopes of harming themselves lethally. And I'll say lethally because this is YouTube and I don't want to say, well, I'll say it because it needs to be said. This is not for the intention of killing themselves. So lethal is, killing yourself, basically. So these injuries are self-inflicted for the purpose of something other than killing themselves. All right. So then it says B, and again, it's not something of a trivial nature. So picking at a sore or biting your nails is not self-injury. So B says the intentional injury is associated with at least 2 of the following. Number 1, negative feelings or thoughts such as depression, anxiety, tension, anger, generalized distress, or self-criticism occurring in the period immediately prior to the self-injurious act. So occurring in the period immediately prior to the self-injurious act. So before they cut, or before they stab, or whatever it is that they're doing to injure themselves, this all has to be associated with negative feelings or thoughts like depression, anxiety, tension, or self-criticism immediately before they do this self-injurious act. So if someone's parent told them, let's use self-criticism, well, let's use self-criticism. So let's say that someone's parents tell them that they're too fat and they're too skinny, and the child went and they ate a donut and they looked in the mirror and they saw that their stomach was a little bit bigger than it used to be 2 days ago or whatever. And so they say, well, darn, maybe I am fat. And then right after that, they cut themselves. So that's what this is saying. The intentional injury is associated with at least 2 of the following. That's one of them. The second one is prior to engaging in the act, a period of preoccupation with the intended behavior that is difficult to resist. So prior to the cutting, and I'll just use cutting because that's just the topic that I wanted to talk about. So prior to engaging in the cutting, they have a period of preoccupation with the intended behavior, the cutting, that is difficult to resist. So prior to cutting, they're preoccupied by it. They're thinking about it. They're thinking about cutting, and they can't resist the thought of thinking about cutting. So number 3, the urge to engage in self-injury occurs frequently, although it might not be acted upon. So again, they have the urge to cut, and they have the urge frequently, although they might not actually do it. And then the fourth one, it says the activity is engaged in with a purpose. This might be relief from a negative feeling or cognitive state, or interpersonal difficulty, or induction of a positive feeling state. The patient anticipates these will occur either during or immediately following the self-injury. So the patient anticipates that the negative feelings will occur either during or immediately following the self-injury. So these activities are engaged in with a purpose. And again, it says that they might be trying to get relief. That's the big thing, because I've had people tell me that they want relief from whatever it is they're going through. And the self-injury, it goes across the board. It's not just females. It's not just white females. It's across the board. Black, white, kids, adults, youth, everybody, female, male. I've seen it. I've seen white male cutters, black female cutters as my patients. The lady that I told you about that I saw on the way from Savannah, she was an older white female. I've seen a younger black female when I used to work with at-risk youth also cut. And I just never understood it. And that's why I wanted to do some research on this to kind of give y'all some information too, in case you wonder about it. So, okay. So that said that they had to have at least 2 of those 4 things that we just discussed. Then it says C, the behavior and its consequences cause clinically significant distress or impairment in interpersonal, academic, or other important areas of functioning. So it's not that, they cut themselves and, it doesn't cause any distress. It has to cause clinically significant distress or impairment in interpersonal, academic, or other important areas of functioning. So if their life is not being affected by it, I guess, according to this, then that's something that might not be non-suicidal self-injury. It could be just, I don't know, just a habit or something. I don't know. So then D says the behavior does not occur exclusively during the states of psychosis, delirium, or intoxication. So that means that they're not only doing this when they're psychotic or delirious or intoxicated. In individuals with a developmental disorder, the behavior is not part of a pattern of repetitive stereotypies. I've never heard of that word, but okay. So the behavior cannot be accounted for by any other mental or medical disorder, like a psychotic disorder, pervasive developmental disorder, mental retardation. And this is probably, this is old. It's from 2010 because we don't use the term mental retardation anymore. And I'm thinking that PDD is also something that we don't use anymore, according to DSM-5, but I can't say for sure, but I know for sure we don't use mental retardation anymore. So then it says potential, not otherwise specified categories. If DSM-5 adopts subtyping, it says non-suicidal self-injury disorder, not otherwise specified, type 1 sub-threshold. It says the patient meets all criteria for non-suicidal self-injury disorder, but has injured himself or herself fewer than 5 times in the past 12 months. So they could be a cutter and they haven't cut 5 times or more in the last 12 months, then it would be not otherwise specified. This can include individuals who, despite a low frequency of behavior, frequently thinks about performing the act. Then it also says type 2 of the not otherwise specified. It says the patient meets criteria for non-suicidal self-injury disorder, but insists that in addition to thoughts expressed in the other section of B4, which I'll put the link here, they also intended to commit suicide. So that's something that we have to be aware of, because like I said, most of the time, according to the information that I found, people are not cutting or engaging in non-suicidal self-injury for death, to kill themselves. They're doing it to relieve trauma, emotional stress, and that kind of thing. They're not doing it to kill themselves. So, but this says that if it's not otherwise specified type 2, then the patient meets the other criteria, but they also intend to kill themselves or commit suicide or complete suicide. We want to keep up with these terms and things. So people don't commit suicide, they complete suicide is the terminology right now. And then it says the implications for creating and including an independent diagnostic category for self-injury are immense. And then they start talking about other stuff. So that's from Psychology Today. So let me go back and look and see if anybody has any questions. Let's see. Renata says, hello, hi. For a second, I thought that was me. What did you think was you? Cat, not cat. The client was cutting due to trauma. She reported forgetting about the event. Okay. What do you mean by she reported forgetting about the event, Anita? Okay, let's see what else. So that's that. And while I'm waiting for her to respond, another thing that I found on mentalhelp.net, 6 reasons why people self-injure. So I'm not going to read through all of this stuff. They also have the suicide hotline number on here. So it's 1-800-23-TALK. And then they also have 1-800-SUICIDE. And then, of course, 911. And I'll put all of that in the description box, too, in case you need it. Let me get this top off this pen. So it's 1-800-SUICIDE. And I'm going to put the numbers out, too, because I know some people need the numbers instead of just the words. So 1-800-SUICIDE and then 1-800-273-TALK. And this, of course, is for everybody in the country and not just my state. So I try to give y'all information that is not specific to South Carolina, where I'm from, but something that can apply to everybody. So that's that. So let's see here. 6 reasons why. Let's scroll down. I'm just going to hit the high points here. So it says, number 1, they want to distract themselves or alter the focus of their attention or regain control over their minds when experiencing pressing, unavoidable, and overwhelming feelings or thoughts. So I can see that. The patient that I have that is the female cutter, she tries to hide it, of course. Well, I won't say of course, because some people don't, but she tries to hide it. But she is a teenager and she has relationship issues. She has self-esteem issues. She has issues with her parent. She has a whole lot of stuff going on. And so when I will ask her what happened right before she cut, she will say, well, she had an argument with her boyfriend, or she often feels rejected by boys. She's very insecure about her weight and that kind of thing. So she really has a lot of self-esteem issues. And I think that's one of the main reasons why some younger females cut, is because of social situations with relationships and family and that kind of thing. So I could definitely see why it says unavoidable and overwhelming feelings or thoughts. And it's really sad. I really hate it when I start thinking about, people, patients and clients that I've come across, because they're so young and they don't really see past today. They don't really have a whole lot of hope for the future because they're stuck in their current circumstance and they don't really see that the future can and will be better for them. And so they feel stagnant. And I just hate it that they can't see past the now. But okay, so number 2, they do it to release tension associated with strong emotions or overwhelming thoughts. So again, when you have anxiety built up and that kind of thing, and again, I'm not a cutter, so I don't know, but according to this, it says that it releases that tension. Number 3 says feel something physical when they are otherwise dissociated and numb. And so that's what I was kind of talking about a few minutes ago, where you kind of just get emotionally drained and you don't feel anything. And I've been there before, where I just felt numb and I felt dissociated, and it's hard to explain because it is a physical feeling. And unless you felt it before, then you probably wouldn't understand it. But if you've ever felt just like you can't feel emotion, you can't feel anything, you just feel empty, your body feels like it's being pulled down and you just feel drained, like, and it's not even like a tired feeling, it's just an emotionally drained feeling, then it says that that people who experience that, some people, the people who cut or otherwise self-injure, they want to feel something physical when they're otherwise dissociated or numb. So they want to feel alive is what they say. They want to cut so they know that they're present, that they are being, and that they are. So I could understand that. Number 4 says express themselves or communicate and or document strong emotions they are feeling and cannot otherwise articulate. Okay. I could see that. I can't really conceptualize that fully though, because like, again, I'm not a cutter, but I could see how someone would want to express themselves or communicate and or document strong emotions that they're feeling that they can't otherwise articulate. I could see that, but I can't fully understand that, but I can see that though. Number 5 says to punish themselves, and I could see that as well. Number 6 says experience a temporary but intense feeling of euphoria that occurs in the immediate aftermath of self-harm. I could see that too. Okay, so let's see here. And then they go into, let's unpack these 6 reasons why people self-injure. And again, I won't go into all of that. I'll link down there if you want to read through some of this stuff. It's very interesting though. It really is. To me anyway. Some people don't like stuff like this, but okay. So I'm going to put that link down there. I'm going to put the link to the review of the literature. I'm going to put the link to the Psychology Today. There's also a PDF that I found. Let's see. Oh, that's another review of the literature. For those of you who like research and all that kind of stuff, have at it. I'm going to put the links to both of those down there. Another one that I found on healthline.com, understanding why people cut themselves, hide it, and how to help. This is a good one. I read this earlier. And they talked about there can be a link. It says there can be a link between self-harm and childhood trauma, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. And other links include mental health issues like borderline personality disorder, suicidality, anxiety, and depression. This was a really good article. Let me see if there's anything I want to point out from this. And I've seen patients and clients who self-injure because of sexual abuse in their childhood. I have seen that. And I've had people tell me that that's the reason why they do it. So then this is another one that kind of has some numbers and statistics, but it doesn't go into the whole literature review. It says that cutting does not have a profile or pattern. It says the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine estimates that 1 to 4% of adults and approximately 15% of teenagers in the United States engage in self-harm. And it says that college students appear to be the group in the greatest risks, with rates ranging from 17 to 35%. So that kind of blew my mind, because I would think that teenagers would be the one with the highest risk because of their inability, or what they see as their inability to get out of their current situation. But I was really surprised when they stated that college students were the ones with the greatest risk, because it seems like, when you're a college age, you're finally out of you're not out of it emotionally and mentally, but physically you're out of that situation because you're able to start your own independent life as a person. You've left the home and that kind of thing. But also, when I think about it a little more deeply now, I could see how when you come from a traumatic background or childhood, and then you go into life as an adult in college, and you don't have those tools to cope with whatever it was that you went through, I could see how that could bring about a whole different kind of stress and, that kind of thing. So I could definitely see how that could be. And it's so dark in here. I don't know why I keep not turning the light on and closing the blinds, because it starts out being light and then it gets dark, but sorry about that. So let's see. I could see how someone who was college age would be overwhelmed with living life on their own and having to be responsible and never have had any kind of resolution for the trauma that they had as a child. And so being thrust into this whole independent lifestyle where you're responsible for yourself and all that kind of stuff. So I could see that happening. Let's see what else is on here. This is a really good article. That one on the top. So then it says, but self-harm isn't limited to a group, gender, or age. As I said before, it says that the owner of New York City Family Therapy says children as young as 9 and 10, teens, college students, and even adults in their 40s and 50s cut. Now, I haven't really seen a lot of adults cutting other than, like I said, the one lady that I saw the other day. But I don't think I've ever seen an adult cutter. But then again, I haven't worked with a whole lot of, well, yeah, I have worked with some adults, but I haven't worked with a lot of adults in a different setting. So, but yeah, it says, of course, even adults in their 40s and 50s. It says there's not always a timing or pattern to self-harm. So it says that it could be cyclical. Someone may cut frequently and then stop for long periods before relapsing. And then they give examples. I don't want to read the examples and stuff, but let's see. Cutting can become an addiction. So they kind of equated cutting to alcohol, you know, how you self-medicate and how you drink alcohol to self-medicate and cope with your problems. They kind of equated that to cutting to alcohol addiction. So it says self-injury can mirror substance abuse or substance addiction because it's a form of self-medication that someone may crave and may have trouble stopping. People who cut often describe a specific type of high, relief, correctedness, or sense of calm. It says the euphoria may be attributed to endorphins the body releases when we get injured. So then they start talking about endorphins and all of that. And then they talk about the history of cutting. And again, I won't bore you with reading through that. And then they talk about how the media misrepresents cutting and how they sometimes glorify it or romanticize it and make it seem like, you know, a positive thing when we know that it's not. And they also talk about how people who actually self-injure in real life, they are ashamed of it. Some of them are ashamed of it and they try to hide it and they don't want to romanticize it and they don't want you to see it. And I see that all the time with the kids that I work with. They wear long sleeves into the appointment, but then, you know, sometimes your sleeves end up rising and I'll see the cuts and I'll, you know, ask them about it, but I don't make them feel like they're wrong for doing it. I don't make them feel bad for doing it. Now, I do always assess for suicide. I always assess every single time. And I did a training with an agency here in South Carolina, and they told us every single time you see the patient, you need to assess for suicide. And we need to be comfortable asking about it and being direct about it. So I know a lot of people are uncomfortable. It's kind of a taboo subject for some people to just come out and ask somebody. But I always try to be direct and I always ask directly, have you thought about killing yourself? I don't say harming yourself because harming yourself could be, you know, purposely falling down the stairs or tripping up on something purposely. So I always say, have you thought about killing yourself in the last 2 weeks? Or when was the last time, if you know that they have thought about it, you know, asking them directly, when have you thought about killing yourself since we last talked, and be direct about it. And I think the more you do it, the more you get used to it, where you can just be direct about it. And talking about suicide does not cause people to want to complete suicide. So I think, and that's what we've been taught. And I say we, when I went to that training, they tell us that a lot of people don't want to talk about it because they think that asking about it or talking about it causes people to want to go through with it. But I think a lot of people have, or some people have, suicidal ideation, and they don't feel like they can talk to anybody about it because, it's a bad thing, especially in the society. It's a bad thing. So I think that when we actually talk about it and ask about it, it kind of probably provides them some relief because they know that somebody cares enough to ask about it. So as social workers, we can't be afraid to be direct and ask specifically, have you thought about killing yourself or killing someone else? And that's homicidal ideation. So be direct, ask specifically. If you see any hesitation, don't be afraid to call it out. I do it all the time. I had a child, and I asked her directly if she had ever thought about killing herself. And she was like, no. And it was just like, I'm like, okay, so I saw you hesitate a little bit. Like, what was that about? And then she sat and she thought about it for a few seconds, and her dad was in the room. And I asked, I'm like, well, she kind of hesitated. And then he kind of spoke for her, which I didn't really like, but he's the parent, and she was like 13 or 14 years old. So he was saying some stuff about her mom and all this stuff, and said that was why she hesitated. But I don't really think that he has the answer for her. You know what I mean? So if she hesitated, I feel like she had a reason for hesitating, and he can't really say for her what her reason was. But again, you always assess. And I gave her resources such as the local crisis line, the teen text line, as well as the line that you can call. And of course, educate the parents on always calling 911 if something happens, or if you suspect that the child might be a harm to themselves or someone else, and that kind of thing. Let's see, what else here? So yeah, the media misrepresenting. I really want to make sure that people are comfortable with assessing for suicide, because it is very important. And sometimes you will never catch it, because a lot of times kids and patients, they get in with professionals and social workers and nurses and doctors and things, and they know the questions that we're going to ask, and they are hip to the game. So they know to just say no and not to hesitate, so sometimes they know what it is, and they may be suicidal. But I think when you build that rapport with people and with patients and families and clients and families, then you can pull some of that out of them for them to tell you the truth, or you can cause them to trust you enough to be willing to talk about it. And then, like I said, sometimes they will just make it seem like everything is okay, and it's not. And you won't ever catch on to it because they're so good at faking it, and they don't want people to know. And I went to supervision yesterday. So, of course, I'm doing my supervision for my independent license. I went to supervision yesterday, and we talked about some of my colleagues. They were talking about patients of theirs, and they work with substance abuse. They were talking about some of their patients who had completed suicide and how they felt about it and that kind of thing. And so I just want to say, if that ever were to happen to you, if you have a patient that actually goes through with it, that completes suicide, or if you have had someone to do that, it's not your fault. There's nothing that you could have done about it other than, if you asked or you didn't ask and you didn't, do what you needed to do as far as reporting and getting the person help. But, if you've done all that you can, you've assessed for suicide, you've addressed hesitation, you've built the rapport, and if they went ahead and did it anyway, I know it's easier said than done to not blame yourself, but some people will blame themselves for it because they are the therapist or they're the social worker, and they feel like they should have been able to save this person and that kind of thing. And I've never had that happen to me. I've had a patient, not a patient, and I keep saying patient and client because I work at the hospital, and so we call them patients. But technically, we're supposed to call them clients according to the book and all this other stuff. But when I had clients, when I worked in different, with a different demographic, we call them clients. But I had a client at a previous job who did actually complete suicide. It was not while I was working with that family, but this child had went on to go and further his education, and later, like 2 weeks after going to college, supposedly completed suicide. And I say supposedly because the parent doesn't think that that's what actually happened. But anyway, so yeah, so I kind of felt like I knew this kid, and even though I didn't work with him directly as his case manager, his mom was on my caseload and he was on a colleague's caseload, but we worked with the family as a whole. I kind of felt like this was definitely his personality. Like he ran his life the way that he wanted to run his life. And so I don't know, but you know, my colleague who actually had him on her caseload, she blamed herself because she felt like she didn't do enough during the time that he was there as her client. And I had to tell her, you know, this is not your fault. Like, it's nothing you could have done. Is you didn't know, you know, nobody knows everything that other people are going through. Nobody will ever know everything about somebody. So all of us have skeletons in our closet, and there's some things that we'll take to the grave with us, and nobody will ever know, you know, how many nights somebody cried and then next day went to work with a smile on their face, or people won't ever know the effects that words have on people from their parents or from their childhood or from a relationship or from a sibling or whatever. And people, you just don't know what people are carrying through life. And so people are not 100% transparent. And so we can do all that we can, and we try to do all that we can to help people, but we just have to face the reality that we can't save people. You know, we can help them help themselves. We can do all that we can. We can encourage, we can motivate, we can advocate, we can give resources, we can counsel, we can do all this stuff. And all the stuff that we do, it helps. Of course, we see successes all the time, but there's sometimes where things are a little bit deeper, and not just because people complete suicide, but because they continue to live life and things don't change for them. It's just sometimes we're not God. Like, we can't fix people. And a lot of people want us to fix people, and that's not what we're here to do. We can't fix anybody. We can't fix ourselves. I mean, you know. So anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but yeah, so if that were to happen, or if that has happened, don't blame yourself. Try not to blame yourself, because, you know, if you've done all that you could and you've gone above and beyond, there's some things that you just can't stop. And that's the reality of it. So then they talk about non-suicidal self-injury and a suicide attempt aren't the same thing. So, and this is saying that non-suicidal self-injury is now listed as a disorder in the 5th version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5. So I guess that it is. It says the reasoning behind this, according to an NPR article, is to differentiate self-harm methods like cutting from suicide attempts, because the treatments for the two are very different. So they're saying that it is in the DSM-5 and that it's in there because of they wanted to differentiate between the treatments for something like self-harm or self-injury and a suicide attempt. So then they talk about treatments for cutting, and they talk about the dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT, and that's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And then they talk about the psychodynamic therapy as well. It says psychodynamic therapy helps someone look at any past experiences that might have an effect on their behavior and identity issues of low self-esteem, perfectionism, or anger management. And then they talk about tips for quitting. It says incorporate other ways to problem solve, like art therapy, gain a support system through friends or community, and get out of negative situations like unhealthy relationships. So, and then they talk about how you can find help. So I'm going to put all this in the description box below. So if you want to look through it, then you can. And it's been about an hour now. So I'm going to end now and see if anybody has any questions about anything. Okay, so let's see. She reported forgetting about the event. Okay, she was trying to forget about the event, but the thoughts continued. Okay, so that's why she cut. Okay, and then you're preaching the social worker. I agree totally. Okay, thanks. Okay, so yeah, any questions or comments before we end the session? Again, when we talk about the meetup, then it's going to be in Georgia, and I'll put a poll up to decide, where and which weekend in June y'all want to meet. Again, I'm thinking Atlanta, or, we can do Augusta or somewhere that has mountains and that kind of thing. So thanks for sharing. You're welcome. This video will be up on YouTube, and it'll also be in the Facebook group. Also, the personal consulting and coaching. Again, I made a video that's on the YouTube page. I posted that earlier last week just to give you an idea about the topics that I'll be covering in the personal consulting and coaching. Again, it's not therapy. I'm not going to be using therapy models. It's just helping people through a hard time or a challenge or something that they're facing in life. And again, just check that video out on the Day-to-Day Social Work YouTube page. Ms. Sellers, I haven't forgotten about you. Just send me an email. I'm not going to forget about you, Ms. Sellers. Send me an email and we'll chat. Okay, so I'm going to look on Facebook and see if anybody's on here. Oh, it says that it stopped. Oh, dang it. Well, I'll just post the video up there. Okay. All right. So if nothing else, I hope y'all have a great week. It's still Social Work Month, and, continue to celebrate being social workers. Continue to do all the work that you do. Thank you for the work that you do. If you don't hear people say that enough, I mean, you just don't know the impact that you make on people each day. And sometimes we'll never know, or we won't know for years, because people will reach out to you years later and say, hey, I know I did. When I was younger, I had a social worker that was in our family, and I reached out to her a few months ago and told her that she was the reason why I wanted to do social work and be a social worker, or one of the reasons why, because I wanted to be just like her. And that kind of made her day. And I was happy because it had been years since I had even seen her or talked to her. So keep doing the work that you do. You don't know who you're impacting sometimes. Sometimes people are looking up to you and looking at you and you don't even know it. And so I know that it gets hard sometimes. It gets overwhelming and people dump all their issues on you and stuff like that. Engage in self-care and keep pushing. Be strategic about your career. If you want to do more in your career, if you want to be a therapist, if you want to do independent practice and that kind of thing, be strategic. I know there are some people subscribed to this channel who are still in grad school and working on their MSW or even their BSW and things like that. So don't be discouraged. I've seen a forum out there where people are saying that they hate social work and they wish they had done something else. Well, if you feel that way, maybe social work wasn't ever for you, because most of us feel like this is a calling for us and we do it because we love it and we don't see ourselves doing anything else. And people always say, oh, social workers don't make any money and blah, 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 blah. And that's not true. Like, if you strategically plan your career like anybody else, there's travel social workers that I've seen. There's groups on Facebook for traveling social workers. And if you like to travel and do what you love, then go and if you have that kind of free spirit, because I'm used to stability where I need to be able to have a consistent paycheck and be able to budget and save and do all that stuff. And I don't really like to do all this traveling back and forth. I like being stable. But some people are free-spirited and they like to go and do stuff like that. And I wouldn't mind doing it for like a week somewhere in a different state. But to just have that as my constant thing that I do, I'm not in for that. But some people are, and there are travel social work positions, and most of them you have to be licensed. Some of them you don't have to be licensed. you know, you could do that and they make pretty good money. You know, a lot of people start out and work their way up. That's what I've been doing, is working my way up, and I'm still working my way up. I feel comfortable with my pay and my position. I love doing the work that I do. I get to work from home. I get to go see patients at their homes, at their schools, in their doctor's offices and stuff. And I feel like I'm making an impact. So, oh, Anita says that she travels. So you're a travel social worker? Traveling social worker. So, I mean, connect with people. I mean, you just never know. And that's what I made this whole day-to-day social work thing about. Yes, it's about helping you pass the exam, but also about, you know, all things social work, which is why I started the Sunday social thing, because a lot of the stuff that I talk about in Sunday social is stuff that can help you on your exam in some way, but also just helps you in the field. Oh, okay. That can also help you in the field as well. When I say, and Anita says that she travels to clients' homes. When I say the traveling social workers, I mean like people go from, it's like a traveling nurse, basically, where people go on contracts from different states for like 3 weeks at a time, and they get a stipend, they get their meals and their lodging and their airfare paid for to go. A lot of strikes were happening and are happening in California. And so there are people who think that it's unethical for there to be traveling social workers going and doing this work that some of the people who are out on strike are refusing to do. But, you know, that's a personal opinion. Some people don't think that it's right because they're striking for legitimate reasons or for their legitimate reasons. And we don't know what those reasons are a lot of times because they don't tell us on those sites. But, you know, if you think that it's fine, then I say go for it. Just within my state, right? Yeah, I do some traveling too within my state, but I don't know if I want to go from state to state like that. Okay, so again, I want y'all to be more involved. And like I said last week, I want to be able to bring some of y'all in on a call and talk to y'all during the live Sunday socials and have questions answered and talk about cases and that kind of thing. So I'm going to end this here. I hope y'all have a good week. I go to therapy again on Tuesday this week, so I'll give y'all an update next Sunday. But if you're going through something, you know, please go and get counseling. Please do. I mean, counseling has been good for me so far. Had a major breakthrough the last time I went to see my therapist. So at first I wasn't 100% a believer that therapy helped me for the specific situation I was going through. But once we start digging into my past and all that kind of stuff that kind of connected with the issue I was going through, I definitely see that I will definitely be benefiting from therapy. So go for it. If you want to do personal coaching as opposed to therapy, then we can also do that. I'm not doing any therapy, but I'm doing personal consulting and coaching. So my teacher's daughter did that. She travels to England and comes home a few weeks. So yeah, I mean, don't let anybody talk you out of social work. If this is what you want to do, you can be comfortable and make a comfortable living being a social worker and, you know, be fine just like anybody else. You just have to plan your career out and be strategic about it. And don't settle for less, you know. So yeah. All right. So I'm going to end this because I don't want to keep babbling on. I will see y'all next Sunday. Happy Social Work Month. Look for the poll in the Facebook group for those who want to meet up in June, and look in the description box when I post this video for all of the numbers and all of the links to all of the information and the review of the literature. So until next Sunday, I will see y'all later.